fragments of nature are found under a layer of volcanic ash, suggesting that a huge volcano or cataclysm of some kind, maybe a comet hitting the Earth, caused a dramatic shift that we're now seeing the remnants of today. Further, I'd like to take a moment to discuss with you the legendary Piri-Reis map, an old map drawn by admiral and cartographer Piri-Reis in Constantinople in 1513, which describes with remarkable geographical detail the seismic profile of certain portions of Antarctica. Reis used information gathered from many explorers at the time. But what's amazing about this map is that Reis could not have acquired his information about Antarctica from any contemporary explorers, because this continent remained undiscovered until nearly 300 years after the map was drawn. But what's perhaps even more anomalous about this whole thing is that the map depicts what Antarctica looks like under ice-free conditions. The last time that area would have been free of ice would have been at least 6,000 BC, which was a whole millennium before the Sumerian civilization really began to emerge into the culture we know today. A note on the southernmost section of the map reads, "And in this country, it seems that there are white-haired monsters in this shape and also 6-horned oxen. The Portuguese infidels have written it in their maps." Interestingly, the Portuguese provided information on this southernmost region in Reis's map, according to the notes on it. Now, Piri-Reis himself left notes that his map was drawn from pre-existing information and maps. However, he himself did not venture any suggestions as to the identity of the cartographers who produced these earlier maps. In 1963, however, Professor Hapgood proposed a novel and thought-provoking solution to the problem. He argued that some of the source maps the admiral had made use of, in particular the ones that were said to date back to the 4th century BC, had themselves been based on even older sources, which in turn had been based on sources originating in the furthest of antiquity. There was, he asserted, irrefutable evidence that the Earth had been comprehensively mapped before 4000 BC by a hitherto unknown and undiscovered civilization, which had achieved a high level of technological advancement. The Piri-Reis anomaly and the mysteries of Antarctica are described with significant detail in Graham Hancock's book, Fingerprints of the Gods, and we highly recommend giving it a read, along with his follow-up book, Magicians of the Gods. Now, before we move on, there's just a few more interesting things that I have to share with you about Antarctica. The first is a particularly curious accidental leak of information that supports this idea that something is going on down there, and it actually comes from Fitbit. You see, recently Fitbit published a world heat map with Strava to show where people are commonly wearing their Fitbits. Now, I suppose most people do not disable their location services because this published map at first showed a number of curious formations under the ice in Antarctica, including a large ring and some other underground bases. Since this was initially published, the government or whoever has forced Fitbit to remove these images from their public heat map, but you can still find a few YouTube videos of people pointing them out. Well, hey, like this one. Finally, in the last several years, photos that were taken using Google Earth were publicized, causing more than a few heads to turn. Here is one that shows a rather curious formation that is clearly not natural to the environment. And here is one that looks more than a little bit like a pyramid. Many were quick to suggest that this was a remnant of some Atlantean civilization, but many critics were quick to put forth that it was just a four-sided mountain, and that pyramid-shaped peaks are very common, such as the Matterhorn in the Alps and Mount Bullenstinder in Iceland as notable examples. And while there's no question that these are mighty mountains, this one in Antarctica is significantly cleaner. There's just no comparison really. It's much less rigid than any of the examples the skeptics give to try and debunk it. But look, it might just be a convenient mountain. We don't claim to know either way, but it's interesting to look at and ponder, wouldn't you agree? Now, along with all of these ancient discoveries and the revelation of our distant past, there is also the conversation of the Richat structure, sometimes called the Eye of the Sahara or Heart of Feathers in Arabic, which is commonly believed by many today to be a remnant of Atlantis. There's actually some pretty strange coincidences about it that have led many people today to assume the connection. You see, in his writings, Plato explained that the central city of Atlantis was sectioned into 3 rings, each with a large moat of water between them. And this is what draws many people to believe the Richat structure to actually be Atlantean remnants. For as we look at it from space, it really does appear almost exactly like Plato's account. but there's a little bit more to the theory than just looking similar. In a nutshell, according to Plato, the first king of Atlantis was known as Atlas, who divided his kingdom among his brothers and eventually created the vast empire that occupied much of the known world. But get this, according to the legends of the Berber people, who today live in Northwest Africa, they also have a mythical founder king who, you guessed it, was also called Atlas. Granted, there's not much to suggest they are the same person, and even Atlas of Mauritania is partly folklore. But according to reconstructed maps based on Herodotus's writings a while before Plato, some say he placed Atlantis in the same region right below the Atlas Mountains in Morocco. Now, it's worth pointing out that C14 dating places the Eye of the Sahara between 400 and 40 million years old, so it's way older than anything we've come across so far, and current research suggests that it's just one of those weird geological changes brought about by the separation of Pangaea. But what if it actually was an even older remnant of Atlantis? If we look back to Plato's account, he actually gives us some pretty good descriptions of what the environment and surroundings of Atlantis looked like. He tells us that the islands were larger than ancient Libya and Asia Minor combined, although this may be speaking to its power level, and that the Egyptians described Atlantis as an island consisting mostly of mountains in the north and a huge plain in the south. He also says that the Atlanteans dug a great canal to the sea, and alongside the bridges carved tunnels into the rings of rock so that ships could pass into the city. Now, if we look at the Richat structure, we can see that it has an opening, canal-shaped shaft to the south, which matches Atlantis's description of connecting to the sea. Further, a 2011 study seemed to indicate that carbonate within the breccia, bits of sedimentary rock, were created by low-temperature hydrothermal waters. The eye also has mountains to the north, again, just like Plato said, which potentially have evidence of ancient rivers around them, as well as being situated on a huge open plain. Really, the surrounding mountain shapes and steep drops are uncanny resemblances to the description. What's more, geologically, the surrounding area is apparently full of red, black, and white colored stones, which Atlantis was said to have a lot of. Archaeologically speaking, the Richat has huge amounts of Archeolian and pre-Archeolian artifacts present along the northwest of the Outer Ring. It really is a mystery how these early Stone Age artifacts got here, as neither recognizable midden deposits nor man-made structures have been recognized. But the current theory suggests that the area was either used for only short-term hunting and stone tool manufacturing, or the artifacts got diffused and moved there by different glacial cycles. Interestingly though, back in 2007, a number of unfossilized whale bones were found throughout Mauritania in the area surrounding the Richat structure, along with numerous assortments of shells, indicating that at some point in recent geological history, the area was lower and closer to sea level. Finally, even the scientific explanation of the Richat, that it was formed by the molten rock pushing its way to the surface and then collapsing, going through multiple periods of being forced up and down, seems strangely reminiscent of Plato saying that Atlantis was destroyed by earthquakes. All this said, it is just a theory, for if this really was Atlantis, it pushes our dating back from 13,000 years to over 40 million, and calls into question the other ideas concerning Antarctica and even North America. But it's still very interesting to think about nonetheless.